turn that time over to Joe.
Thank you, Dan. Welcome, everyone, to our discussion today about a better customer and citizen engagement. This is Joe Christie speaking. I've been in the technology consulting business for over 30 years. And in the last 20, I've focused on web digital experiences and portals. And I've led teams that have implemented global portals for companies such as Nissan, PepsiCo, Daimler Chrysler, Northrop Grumman, and of course, the state of Ohio. Over the course of the last 20 years, I've worked with a lot of digital experience platforms, or portal platforms, as they're sometimes called, to implement solutions. And one of the platforms that I've used a great deal is the HCL Total-expereince platform. The modern government solution that we'll be discussing today, and of course the state of Ohio, is based on the HCL platform. Let me start, as Dan has introduced himself, let me start by introducing first HCL and HCL software, which represents the software component of the solution. HCL Software is about a $1.5 billion software company who has a very mature product offering in the consumer and in the customer digital experience realm. They offer business and industry solutions such as marketing, e-commerce, and web analytics. They offer tools that help improve those solutions through advanced analytics and artificial intelligence and operational integration, so that you can improve, you can anticipate what customers are going to do, you can analyze what customers have done, and you can optimize the services that you offer to customers through some of these tool sets. They offer a very comprehensive data and analytics tool set, and I'm going to show you an example of how that was applied during this presentation. And they offer cybersecurity products, which help in vulnerability detection and mitigation, as well as offer secure DevOps and compliance from applications to endpoint. And finally, they offer digital experience software. And this is the software that interconnects all of what I've talked about here, as well as all the systems that agencies use to provide information to customers and citizens. And so the digital experience is all about creating customer, citizen, employee experiences, multi-user experiences, et cetera. And is often said, the HCL digital experience is really the core of the total experience software. Base 22 represents the implementation side of the solution and is, as Dan mentioned, a long-standing partner of HCL. We're a software and consulting firm who's developed and implemented this modern government solution, among many others. The experience that we bring to you comes from 15 years of innovating and learning with some amazing companies. And with these companies, we've introduced digital transformation in the form of global employee portals, such as those developed for UPS or PepsiCo, or transactional portals, or operational portals, store management portals for companies like Luxottica, and an operations portal for KFC. And of course, the state of Ohio solution we'll be discussing today. So our topics, we're going to discuss a total solution to create a better customer-citizen engagement, both from the standpoint of encouraging digital engagement and allowing citizens to interact and transact with your agency. So in short, increasing the ability for them to do self-service and decreasing the dependence on agency staff to provide support. And of course, that is a big part of digital transformation. And we're going to accomplish that objective by discussing the digital transformation of the state of Ohio. But this is really not about the state of Ohio. My objective is to use the state to demonstrate that the challenges and related solutions can be universally applied across any and all government services agencies. And this solution, which I'll summarize at the end, is of course being offered to you, and you can leverage all of these capabilities to do that. So I suspect you're going to see similarities with the challenges we present. The truth is the technology is not the hard part. The difficulty is setting up the organization to be prepared and organized to adopt the new technology, and then most important, to be able to maintain it in the future so that it doesn't fall back into some of the challenges and issues that you're trying to solve initially. So let's start with the problem. And let's see how much of this you identify with. So the state at the time we walked in the door had about 200 plus websites running across agencies and boards and all kinds of entities. In those 200 websites, they had about 3,000 digital front ends, all different kinds of front ends and ways to present information. And it was very, very complicated and nothing was consistent. They were using all different types of portal and web content tools. They had very inconsistent user interaction, user messaging, interaction with users and how users availed themselves of services. And of course, ADA compliance and other standards compliance was lacking because this was the Wild West. Because they suffered silos with what we call silos with budget syndrome. In other words, these organizations or these segments within the state had their own budgets. And so they did what they chose as they wanted to do it. And an interesting point is about 55% of the state's 1,600 systems, all the systems that they use, maintain personal and financial data with no programmatic capability for identity or fraud protection. And so a data breach or a loss of sensitive data from a state system would have a greater than 80% probability of a direct public impact. So that's a pretty big deal. The challenge is, how do you digitally transform the Ohio experience? How do you simplify the technology stack, improve security, reduce cost, increase speed, and be ready for new technologies as they come along, while avoiding all the political minefield of a large organization or agency? Because if you think about it, how do you get the political and the business and the technology stakeholders across, in this case, 50 or so agencies to agree to give up their technologies for a centralized services approach? And you would have the same, of course, in a large federal agency. So the solution is what we call Innovate Ohio. And it's a program that made the state more effective, more efficient. They're a leader in using technology. They have a high level of customer service. And they, of course, in their case, saved some tax dollars or budget dollars, depending on your point of view. Let's talk about the solution from the standpoint of a user's perspective. So users want to avail themselves of information and services from an agency. And so in this case, things like taxes and jobs and education, grants, and so forth. And as the world has moved along, we know that mobility is key. In other words, the solution has to present itself across a variety of devices, any device. And it has to do that quickly and efficiently, and it has to be consistent. It's got to be secure and private. It should comply with NIST cybersecurity and the cybersecurity framework to protect information. It has to offer single sign-on. So any system should be accessible through one username, one password. In the case of the state of Ohio, with 50 agencies, that proved to be interesting because each of the agencies had their own identity management system, and they had many, many systems behind their websites. And so the key here is, how do you get one identity to access across all agencies and all systems. And finally, personalization, most especially once the citizen is known to the agency because they now want to transact in some way. We need to tailor the presentation to that user and know who they are and give them what they want. And of course, as time has marched on, AI plays a bigger and bigger role in that. So this, I think, we identified what was needed and we all agreed. So the next thing to think about is now, what is the journey? What is the digital journey? I mentioned in the beginning about multiple objectives for creating better customer engagement. So you want to encourage digital engagement, of course, and you want to allow citizens to interact or transact with your agency. So the starting point is to carefully map the user journey by examining user data, analytics, conducting user research. And in doing all of that, we identified 5 stages that you see on the screen and the various activities, not all are here, but various activities that users engage in during that journey. Pretty standard stuff, but we had to make sure that we validated that with citizen users, which is a fairly easy thing to do using the methodology, which I'll talk about, because we use visualization techniques. But next, we had to overlay reality. So we knew that there were many different devices and channels that users would interact with, including a call center who had to have the same view and same interaction with the content that users were having. We had legacy systems, many, that had to be seamlessly integrated, and legacy content that had to be repurposed to deliver targeted content. And so that users would find what they needed and targeted to the need that they had. That content had to serve for intelligent campaigns and campaign management to get adoption, and it had to enable social engagement. So the content had to be repurposed. And we instinctively knew that it had to be delivered in a very consumable and usable service that any agency or department or group could use, so that we could assure there was a common, highly useful experience and standardized user journeys that were required. We had to stop the fragmented user journeys that existed and the different treatments. So we needed a customer experience platform that would deliver the solution very much like a SaaS solution. Present our user journeys as they were designed and integrate into the systems and content that existed in the current state. Those were the things that we needed to accomplish. And so in the end, we chose the HCL customer experience platform because we knew from experience that it would achieve our objectives. It's a mature product with 20 years of history. It supports and delivers some of the largest digital properties on the planet, which we delivered several of. It's cloud-based, so it offers very sophisticated digital content management and systems integration tools, and it supports the creation of very dynamic user experiences using a variety of modern UX tools. And so that's the key, because that gives you the flexibility and that gives you the ability to adapt to future technologies and new technologies as we go along. So the flexibility is very important. Okay, good to go. But wait. We technologists will never implement the digital transformation and solve the challenges that I talked about earlier here. The business will do it. The business has to do it. So the secret sauce and our role is to create a framework and Base 22 created something called the Catalyst framework, so that our role as technologists enable the business to ease the business journey. So, Catalyst frameworks, I say, well, what are we talking about? Well, these are catalysts, and they're both software components and they're processes that serve as the basis for the future solution and the future platform. And they motivate the organization to start using these components. And the catalyst, these processes, these software components share a common DNA. They're very flexible. They're very low friction, so they're easy to use. There's nothing mystical about or black box about the software, and there's nothing mystical about the process. It's a very open process. The software components are pre-configured. So this modern government solution is already has software components that are pre-configured and ready to go. So that doesn't mean rigid, that means they're there to be pre-configured, they're there to be configured. They're very customer-centric. They react, they're intelligent. They're able to know what a user is trying to do. If a user is known, they know who that user is. And they also understand the content. And so if a user is trying to perform a certain activity, they know what content to bring to that user. Or they know if that user, in the case, for example, of an employee portal, if that employee is trying to get at benefits information, those components know exactly what to do to deliver it. So they deliver rapid value quickly. And as I will explain in a minute, it's a force multiplier. Once you start moving forward and people start to see how these things work and they experience how they solve problems, then more and more is wanted and adoption begins. It encourages customer-led action, meaning that it encourages not only internal customers and internal business users to want to get on board, but it encourages citizens and customers to want to use the software for self-service, which is the whole point. Of course, it's digital. The process itself, as I'll explain, aligns the business and the technology strategy together, because that's key. And it is organizational change management ready. In other words, going back to that point of how you get a large organization ready and willing to want to move forward. They have to be able to experience what's going to happen. So how do we do that? How do we expedite it? How do we use Catalyst frameworks to expedite the process and prepare the organization for change and adoption? So what I'm trying to show with this graphic basically is that the dotted line below, where is indicated normal progression, is the typical time frame where you do a project, a standard project. You define requirements, the technologists go off and program to those requirements, they test. They do user acceptance testing. It's a black box for a while, and then the solution is launched. Our approach in our Catalyst framework works a little differently and is highly visual. So A is the starting point, obviously. And the key here is to create, based on requirements, which you don't sidestep that step, is to create design assets and visual prototypes that will allow for experimentation of what the future might look like. So it creates a clear vision. So by working with a key group of stakeholders, we create the vision for what the solution needs to look like. And then we transform that vision into visual prototypes so they can actually see and experience it. That's an iterative process. In other words, we create a certain set of functionality, and then we iterate together online how that solution should evolve, what things should change, until we get it to the point where it's looking like that's exactly what the requirements needed. So as we do that, we then begin to show internal and external audiences these prototypes to get feedback and validation. And that's a very important part. But what you're doing with internal audiences is you're showing them the art of the possible. And you're showing them these components. You're showing them a user experience, for example, that's made up of these components. And if I showed you an employee portal and I showed you a supplier portal, for example, the same components will be used. They're just presenting different information. And so people begin to understand that this is highly reusable, that this approach is now something that is maintainable and is something that can be maintained in the future without any kind of a black box syndrome. And so you continue to use these design assets to create awareness and create internal excitement. So once you've generated excitement by using these components, using this visual approach, using the processes of workshops and so on to move it along, once excitement's been generated, the next big step is to implement some of the technological components necessary to build the vision in prototype that's live. So you take the visual prototype and you make it live. So as this process continues, and as you get one live prototype, one live application, and then another live application, the organization starts to see and experience the delivery of these little mini solutions and pilots that demonstrate immediate improvements and possibilities. At this stage, the pilot projects will be actively exposed to the organization to create an understanding of the platform and create delivery mechanisms and show them what these delivery mechanisms can achieve. It's very important to share success stories, to draw the organization into wanting to use the solution. And as that process is going on, what you're creating then is the enticement zone. And so that's a little longer process, but you're creating pilots, you're showing results, you're gaining benefit, you're evangelizing, and you're helping people understand why adoption is important. So that is the catalyst framework and the processes, because then what starts to happen, as you see in this graphic, is the process accelerates into a digital organization that is sustainable. And that's very important because there's a learning curve that happens here. People learn from a business standpoint, they learn, and from a technology standpoint, they learn how this solution is going to be successful in the future. So let me talk for a second about the Innovate Ohio platform. And you can read all about this platform and more at a site called innovateohio.gov. The state of Ohio shares this whole concept, Innovate Ohio, at innovateohio.gov. Let me first overview the products that support this solution. Those products are, of course, digital identity, user experience, and data and analytics. So the digital identity piece, obviously many agencies have a digital identity and identity management solution in place, and that's great. What this solution did is create this as a service. So in other words, it made it very easy for any of the sub-agencies or sub-departments to tie their applications into this identity service. It's a cloud-based service. It certainly uses an identity management platform and uses SSO, some of which is integrated into the HCL digital experience. And so the key here is you need to have a strong digital identity solution, and it ought to be services-based to make it easy for the applications that exist within the agency to integrate into it. And of course, that's all managed by the HCL digital experience platform. The user goes into the portal, and from there, it's handled behind the scenes and the service access to all the applications. The second piece, of course, is the digital experience. And that has various pieces to it. It has a portal builder, which I'll explain a little more in a minute. It has site analytics, very important because that helps understand how to fine-tune the presentation and how to fine-tune interaction with citizens. It has a digital toolkit, which is a design system that keeps the customer experience and the user experience consistent over time and forces a discipline that requires that as you change the digital toolkit or the design system, there's a formal process to add to it. And when it's added to the toolkit, everyone can use it. So that's really the holy grail of user experience, is having consistent tools that create a consistent experience. And then a web apps platform, which is really all about HCL digital experience and how the platform itself brings together and creates applications, not only on its own, but also integrated into others. The third product, data and analytics, may not be relevant for all who may be participating in this, but I'll explain it to you because it's really interesting, because it utilizes the HCL digital experience to expose data to citizens, to third parties, and some of the data is open, and so you can freely go out to the portal and say, I want this data set, or I want to see this data set. Some of the data is protected. In other words, if you're a researcher, you have to get permission, and you have to specify what you're after and what data set you're after, and those will be the data sets that the portal will configure for you to see. This is all automatic. You identify yourself, it kicks off a workflow, the workflow goes through an approval process. Once that's done, the permissions are added, and then if it's not an open solution, then the person who's applied for it gets access. So it's a very important type of solution if you want to expose data, most especially if you want to expose some protected data. And again, this solution is a part of the digital experience platform. So it's just a version of it and how it's presented. Let me drill down and talk about 3 of the Catalyst frameworks that were used in Ohio. If you remember, I talked about the excitement and enticement zone. And in the enticement zone, you need to create a pilot project that shows everyone the value. Well, the state decided to use the employee portal as their pilot project. And this is big. This is 60,000 employees plus another 10,000 contractors. And they wanted to have a very personalized experience, obviously secure. So it's an authenticated site where users would be permissioned to see certain things. Obviously, contractors are permissioned to see different things than employees. And so this is what they wanted to use for their pilot project. They wanted to prove that these components would deliver that kind of experience. It would integrate into their back-end systems, which in this case happened to have been PeopleSoft and many others. And so that was the pilot, Mile High. And that created a single identity for all employees and contractors. The portal builder was the key. The website or portal builder was the key, because this is the big accelerator. This is what allows you to easily and quickly create modern, responsive, and ADA compliant sites. It includes page templates and components that enable content and communication staff to update their websites and so forth without the assistance of IT service providers. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in just a minute. And then, of course, I mentioned before the digital toolkit. This is the design system. In design language, this is called the design system. And it's the overarching Ohio.gov and Ohio style and Bootstrap toolkit. That's the universal framework to create websites and digital channel applications. And as you see, and as I'm saying here, My Ohio and Portal Builder, that's software as a service. So the onboarding process, for example, is an agency says, I want to have a site, I want it to be on Innovate Ohio. They avail themselves of the service and they begin to implement it using the Portal Builder. Let me show you some examples. Let me drill down. So here, I'll start with the digital toolkit. So it's a simple UX component library. It started out with 38 pre-built UI categories. It had 8 content components, 11 page templates. Everything in here is mobile responsive ready. Certainly every component in here is accessibility compliant. And there were plenty of code samples. And as you can see on the screen, you can see the style guides and you can see the categories. This, of course, has grown, but it's grown under a very controlled environment. And so when you want to use these, you just grab them from the library and you assemble them together using the Portal Builder. Speaking of the Portal Builder, this, of course, as I said, accelerates the creation of sites. It has out-of-the-box templates for things like home, news, events, about us, location help. It allows agencies, divisions, programs to create their own subsites, which are part of the main site. It has search components. It has a search structure in it. It has topical structure. It has taxonomy. Again, everything in it is ADA compliant. And so this is the engine that helps you build the solution, which again is a critical part of the modern government solution. Another key process concept that is part of the Catalyst framework is what we call content first. This is a discipline. This is a rigor around content and how to manage content and how to make sure your content stays fresh and vibrant, how to make sure that the content is governed. So the first two points here, 1 page per idea, single source of the truth, that's a discipline you start. 1 owner per content page, 1 owner per each of these pages, that's a key element because that's a big governance structure. And there's a whole hierarchy here for how pages and subsites and landing pages are created. And each of those things are owned. And each of those things have a discipline about them. All the content is defined. So every piece of content has a purpose, it has an audience, it has a message, it has metadata associated with it. It has voice, it has location. It has all the metadata that's needed to make sure that those intelligent user experience components know the piece of content that it's grabbing and know exactly where it goes. So a lot of this is automatic. A lot of this is built-in governance. When a content author creates a page and puts metadata on it, that metadata tells the portal where this content is supposed to go. It tells the portal how long it's supposed to be there, when it's supposed to start, when it's supposed to end. It tells the portal when it's to deliver it. To some users see it all the time, some users see it some of the time. So that's all built into content first. And that, of course, then allows you to build dynamic pages. So when a user wants something, I know who the user is, and the user's after something, I can build a dynamic dashboard and deliver content and applications to that user. Aggregation is another concept that's inherent in here. And so what this means is, in this example, the Ohio Department of Agriculture creates their own site and creates cards. That card will appear in ohio.gov. And so because you're on one content management system, because this content is shared across one platform, you can share and aggregate data. So ohio.gov aggregates data up from agencies, sub-agencies, and boards. So that's all part of the concept. Because there's one platform and because there's this discipline around content, I can aggregate. Of course, here's another discipline, one card per content item. So when authors create content, they can create a card. Those cards are available to anybody else who wants to use it. So if I'm a department and I want to put content from another department, I just go grab a card, put that card where I want it in my user experience. And then as you can see, from this card, a user can get at this content. And then, of course, is the whole overall experience. This was before, and ohio.gov was a link farm. Now it's a very interactive, very intuitive kind of an experience. It has tools in it. It has the ability to find things by how, who, what, where. This is eventually going to move to AI. Right now, it's not, but it's going in that direction. So these are the foundational components and catalysts that are part of the modern government solution. I'm showing you these in terms of what they look like in Ohio, but these are genericized now. So in the modern government solution, these are configured to what you want them to look like. I'll drill down just for a second. I showed you that search metaphor, which involves improved findability, improved UX metaphor, as I said, the how, who, what. So again, because this content has metadata on it, associating content with these categories in this kind of a search metaphor is very easy to do. So what do we accomplish? Well, the state realized about $17 million in cost avoidance and optimization shortly after phase one completion of the implementation. We initially reduced help desk password reset calls by 85%. That's going to grow to 99%, which really is about $1 million a year. And at the same time, of course, we made their systems more secure. We initially had a goal of integrating 4 applications into the identity management solution that I talked about. But we integrated 200 with the original estimate, and then over 300 have been integrated so far because this is a service. By eliminating all the various technology platforms and all the tools, we had about a $48 million software licensing cost avoidance. And we had 100% compliance with regulatory compliance with NIST privacy and security standards, and of course, ADA compliance. So in a nutshell, and there's much more, these were the accomplishments that we achieved through the implementation of the modern government solution. So what are the success factors? Well, first and foremost, you need to pick and build a flexible technology stack. And that's what HCL Digital Experience represents. For all the things that I've talked about, all the flexibility that I've shown you is inherent in this platform. But it needs some of the construct that we've created, of course, but that's the whole point here, is you have access to all of that. You need to solve the user identity, and I've talked about that more than enough, but that's very important. You can't mandate. Technology can't mandate. No one can mandate. You have to collaborate. You have to get adoption through collaboration and using the techniques that I talked about. So you need to build catalyst frameworks or accelerators, and the approach to helping people understand how to leverage this and processes to help them understand. I said earlier it wasn't a technology problem, and I don't think it is. It's a problem of how you go about doing this. So you need to trust the experts who know how to do this, because, as I said, the technology is one thing, the processes are another. And you need to build a support organization, because you want to sustain this. There's plenty of structure here to sustain it. This isn't like it's coded and here's the code, good luck, Godspeed. There's a whole structure here. All these things I've shown you are the structure. So you can build a support organization around it and instill processes around it to keep it pure, which is what you want to do. So this is, and the solution that I've been talking about is what we call a platform or a digital government platform for as a modern solution for agencies. And it's available to you from HCL and Base 22. And it has the features, and these are only a couple of the features shown on this slide. It's got a digital management solution. It's software as a service. It's got built-in accelerators. It's a multi-tenant solution. So obviously, in this case, in the state of Ohio, there are 50 plus agencies on it, as well as the state agency, the supplier portals on it, the employee portals on it. It is hybrid cloud compatible. It's proven. It has an agile development framework. It is compliant, standards compliant, and it will drastically reduce, your technology cost. So visually, here's the website builder, right? It started with 9 templates. There have been 75 agencies or boards onboarded. So this is, much bigger than perhaps a lot of you may be thinking, but the concepts are identical. You have departments, you have subgroups, you have subservices. And so they all aggregate up to one agency. So the concepts are directly transferable. This is a PaaS and SaaS solution, and it creates a standardized approach to going forward. An employee portal is a part of this, and it's on the same platform, uses the same components. So the things you see here and what I'm going to show you are the same components. It has SSO for contractors and employees. There's a supplier portal. Same components, same platform. It's used to share information to suppliers about purchase orders, invoices, payments, integrating into back-end systems, but creating a user experience that they can control. They can control who in their organization sees what. All of that is built into this. So this isn't administered, for example, in this case by the state, it's administered. The supplier is given access to this, and then the supplier maintains their own control over who has permissions. The Ohio Data Portal is the data portal that I talked about. It contains more than 260 data sets. These data sets, as I said, are either publicly available or they're available on a restricted basis, which then there's a whole workflow process to access it. And then there are, of course, all the agencies. I'm showing you one particular agency. This agency was a huge transformation. This is the Department of Transportation. This solution has geolocation functionality. So I'm a resident of the state of Ohio, as it so happens. I live in Cuyahoga County. It knows where I am. It knows what I'm interested in, and it brings to me information about road projects in Cuyahoga County. There's also a commenting system that is really exciting, that allows users to interact with the 5,000 projects that are being run in the state of Ohio, during orange barrel season. So this is just one simple example of an agency site. There are, as I said, over 75 of these running and so on. So that, I hope I've helped you see how you can deal with challenges that services agencies face and how you can solve them. And so we'll take a break and let's see if there are any questions or any things that any of you would like to discuss.
Hey there, Joe. This is Dan. So I have some questions listed here. Are you ready for them?
Well, I'll let you know after you tell me the first one.
Okay. So the Catalyst framework, So is it both software and consulting? Is that how we would describe it, or is it what are the pieces and parts? If you can
Yes,
do
certainly.
that again.
Well, certainly number one, it is software. It is software components. It's pre-prepared components that come in the solution. It's content first. So that's a discipline, as I said. It is the whole process of starting with prototypes, the process of getting people to want to share the information so that you can develop a prototype and prove to them that you understand the solution and then use that to socialize it. So it's that process. Content first is a process. The discipline, the governance is also part of it. So yes, it's both software components and processes and techniques that are brought as a solution because it's just not technology that you're trying to solve.
Okay, then thank you. And the next question is, was it an army of people to implement the Catalyst framework? I mean, it seems like you work with lots of different people to make that.
Well, no, it doesn't take an army of people. What it takes is a team that consists of an information architect, some designers, some technical architects, because the process, it's a small team. It doesn't, it's a team of 6 to 8 people. And they all have different things that they're going to do, but they're all working together because you're trying to first understand the technology environment you're walking into. So you got to create a technology plan. So that's what the architects do. The information architects and the designers and the business analysts are talking with users. They're saying, all right, let's discuss what are the challenges that you face? What are the user experience challenges? What are the things your citizens or your people that use service are trying to do? And so they get the stakeholders to articulate that. And then they translate that into a visual prototype and say, is this what you meant? Will this solve the problem that you've described to us? Well, no, we need to do this. Okay, fine, we'll change it. We quickly change it. So this is a very rapid process. It's very iterative. It's electronic. And so each of these, this team of, 4 to 6 to 8 people, depending, are eliciting how to go about it, creating visual prototypes, identifying, making sure requirements are well documented, because that traceability is critical, looking at technology and developing a technology strategy. That's all going on concurrently.
Okay,
So it doesn't take an army, no.
that's good.
Now, well, let me add to that. The other key here is making sure that you don't overtax the agency's staff, right? Because they have day jobs. And so this process is designed around maximizing their involvement and minimizing their time. Because otherwise you're never going to make any progress if you're not careful with your clients' staff time.
Okay, good. Thank you. There's just a couple more questions. What adjustments had to be made for the COVID emergency in 2020? Were there adjustments or changes because of that?
I mean, how we went about this, I'm assuming that is a question of how we went about it.
Yeah.
Actually, interestingly enough, we went from a lot of on-site work to a lot of remote, as you would expect. I don't think it was significantly impacted because we held our stakeholder meetings using web meetings. Our tool sets are interactive, and so once we held the web meetings and once we created prototypes, those prototypes were available online to all the stakeholders. And so, for example, at night or when they had time, they would look at the prototypes and they would make comments. They would offer criticisms or comments about how to change it. We would then make the changes, and the next time they looked at the prototype, they would see the changes. And so that's a very interactive process. So the beginning of the process can very well be done remotely. And we did end up doing that. And of course, as everyone knows, that has continued. Once the prototypes are done, And once you start socializing this, you can do this remotely. We prefer, obviously the preference is not to, but you certainly can, and we do, and have been doing it all along. So yeah, COVID did change it a bit, as it changed typically, but our tools are interactive, and so that really didn't bother us much. And we're very big in sharing, so we use wikis and repositories, so all our work product is shared as we go along, so everybody has access to it. That's always been something. So the technologists, for example, are seeing what's going on. They can see code, they can see what's happening. So yeah, COVID changed it, but the process is, a combination of remote and on-site where we can.
Okay. For AI, where are the innovations going to go? Is it more to do with findability, or is it more with integrating services that are AI enabled? Where is it that you see the next step in the AI path?
Yes. Well, okay. So I think there's a couple of facets, and that's going to depend on what the client wants to do. I mean, certainly hyper-personalization. In other words, if you have a need for a very hyper-personalized experience, AI is going to play a big role in it, because it can help you, and it can help you analyze what users do, and then it can help you anticipate what to deliver to a user within our framework, because content first allows that, right? The components and content first allow. So AI can very much be used in hyper-personalization. AI can also be used in an extension of that, and that's anticipation, right? So I can, based on past trends and past user characterizations and past activities, I can anticipate what a user is going to do and deliver it before the user is aware of it. I can use AI to deliver content. More and more content is now being created and delivered using AI. Now, you have to be careful there. And those of you who have read about AI know that you have to exercise some constraint. But AI is used and can be used to generate content, and maintain content and improve content. We use AI in a lot of projects to take content that's there and improve it and make suggestions to it. AI is also, I think, very useful in analyzing trends. And again, this is very specific. If you really need to understand why something is happening, why users are doing something, and you're tying what users are doing to your back-end processes, AI can also be very useful there. So we see it in different facets, just depending on, what we find in place and what the need is.
Okay, great. And the last question is, what categories of applications are there? You talked about the data analytics applications that you could request data and so forth. And I suppose there's others, but what categories of applications are available, for example?
Well, inherent in this solution that we've talked about, in the modern government solution, is, of course, the ability to create authenticated and unauthenticated websites, right? So you can create an unauthenticated websites where you as an agency are presenting who you are, what you do. You can then have a login, and once the user is logged in, you can give them access to resources and or systems. So that's one aspect of it, authenticated and unauthenticated websites. Another predetermined one is employee portal. Another is supplier portal. And then, while it's not predetermined, I talked about web application development. If you want to develop a web application, so for example, we developed a web application using the portal for licensing. So this is a whole application where you come in, you identify yourself, you identify the license you want. It leads you through filling out the information you need. It leads you through a decision tree about what you need to do. If this is what you want, then you have to do these things. And it takes you through the process and then kicks off a workflow behind. That's a web application and an example of one that we developed using, this platform. So you can take this platform, the components in it, the tool sets that are in HCL Digital Experience, and you can create very sophisticated, authenticated web applications. But so that's what you get. And of course, you get the design system, the components, which are part of the Catalyst framework. So those are the things that are inherent in the solution as it relates to software and capabilities.
Great, thank you. So that's all the questions. You can wrap that up, Joe.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank everyone. I hope you found the connection that I was trying to make for you, that you can see how the problems and the challenges and how they were solved here are relevant to your use cases, and how reaching out to discuss this would greatly benefit you. So thank you for participating today.
Okay, thank you. And we'll see you at the next webinar.
Okay. Bye, everyone.